Hello and welcome back to another Daryl Dixon video, and today will be my review for the Book of Carol Season 2 Episode 6. And this episode is the final episode of the season, so does it tell the story well? And most importantly, does this episode live up to all that hype that Norman Reedus has been giving it for months? And personally, I believe, no it does not. This is not another A Certain Doom, which is another episode that he hyped up to be absolutely amazing. I personally hate that episode. This episode is not that bad. However, it does not deserve the hype and all the talk that Norman Reedus has been giving it. So let's jump right into this episode and talk about what I liked about this episode and where did it go wrong. And this episode is another case, in my opinion, of them completely front-loading this episode. This episode really feels like two episodes and two different plots. The first half of this episode is all about Daryl, Laurent, and everyone else, Caudron, Falou, Ash and Carol, trying to get the plane off the ground and trying to get Laurent away from France. And these first few minutes are really intense. I really like how they're like, okay, we're just going to go straight into the villains capture Anne's now forced to give up Laurent, and then everyone's closing in on Daryl, while Daryl and Carol kind of being like, who should stay behind? And they kind of come to the agreement that Daryl should stay behind, and it makes sense. Daryl should stay behind because he understands France, and he knows how to get back to America already by going through England. So there's a bit of a bicker there, but it makes sense. Carol agrees, okay, I will go on the plane with Ash. And it shocks me how short this is. So the villains find Anne, they go to where the plane is, and Anne is questioning, does she go up Laurent, does she not? And there is some epic moments where Anne's like, you know what, I'm going to lead them towards Laurent, but I'm going to do it through the walkers. And you get the burners one final time, absolutely ripping into the villains. Amazing. The main villain gets bit suddenly, and you're like, okay, yep, she's going to die. Was not expect it to be a bite. And then they suddenly just kill off Anne. And I'm very torn about this because it was done well for the character. However, this is the fifth death in 5 episodes. They keep killing off major characters constantly. I want some characters to survive this season. I do not want all the French characters from season 1 to just be killed off. It really feels like it's, as I said, the Carol effect. Carol's in the show, all the other characters get minuscule roles, and then they just get quickly killed off. It's annoying me. Too many characters are dying. Some characters need to just have happy endings. These characters survived 13 years into the apocalypse just for Carol to come into the show, and now they're suddenly all terrible at surviving and all die. I felt her death is rushed. It's right at the start of the episode as well. Why? You could have kept her around. She could have had a happy ending. But moving past that issue, the whole plane and the villains attacking Daryl and everything, absolutely amazing. Super intense. I really enjoy them being like, you know what? We are going to hold the line, get that plane out of there. Very intense from start to finish. Great action scenes, you're getting some cool kills. And they kind of may feel like they're just trying to build the tension a little too much with the plane stalling and everything. And I really thought Caudron was going to die, but he survives, to my surprise. But they did really well with this scene. However, I didn't like the does Carol leave, does Carol stay thing. It was very obvious she was going to get out of the plane, and they even try and hide the fact with having close-ups. And you're like, yes, we know Carol's not on the plane. Don't hide it. You're not as clever as you think you are. But Carol leaving the plane, super dumb. Daryl and everyone had her under control, I think. Daryl was one shot away from making sure the plane would take off. And they have it so Carol gets out of the plane, runs away, lays down, sets up a sniper, just so Carol can do a last-minute save and have a dramatic reveal that she stayed behind. It was dumb. I really didn't like it. Carol should definitely be on that plane. Also, so they're saying that Carol was like, okay, Ash, I need you to fly to Ohio and find a place called the Commonwealth, and then leaves. It's dumb. How does Ash understand where he's going in Ohio? America is a big country, and Ohio is a big place. How's he going to find the Commonwealth? Very easily. The episode just really kind of glosses over that, and I don't like that. That's it for Laurent. He was really interesting with Daryl, and some of the best moments in this season are the emotional moments between Daryl and Laurent. Like the start of this episode starts with Daryl and Laurent singing a song and playing music. That is really cool. There's some great emotional moments in this episode. However, once you get rid of Laurent, we are never going to see him again because he's at the Commonwealth now. We're not going to see him season 3, season 4. We won't see him until probably the final scene of this show. So Now Daryl is back to his original Daryl. Status quo's back with Daryl, which is sad because I really enjoyed a lot of the character moments that they had in this show, but now they've removed it all, so Daryl's now back to status quo. There's no Laurent. They should have done more with Laurent. There is no Isabel. It's just Daryl and Carol, and it really makes me sad because I really enjoyed that. But moving past the first few minutes, and they show up, kill the main villain, she kills herself halfway through this episode. The pacing dips then. You've had this intense pacing, intense feeling, very enjoyable outside. They've just gotten rid of everything that made Daryl interesting in a plane. It then slows down, and you have our characters heading north, and they're all trying to get to the tunnel and meet up with these guides from Scotland to take them over to England. And there's some nice moments, but it does feel the pacing drops a little just because, again, front-ended. They're like, okay, we've done anything interesting in the first half, what are we doing in the back half? A lot of characters just talking. There are some nice moments, like Fleur gets a happy ending, but it is just so sudden and rushed. If you want to give Fleur a happy ending, how about set it up in previous episodes? Not introduce a romance option for Fleur suddenly in this episode for a whole purpose just to give Fleur a happy ending. Come on, make her a character, not a plot device. It really was nice, but it also was, you could have done this better. That's what this episode is a lot of the time. I enjoyed what I saw, but you could have done it better. You could have done it better. You could have told these stories better. And that's what this episode just gives me. There are other little moments in this kind of downtime in the middle, like Caudron and Daryl finally have that talk about him killing Michelle, and it's revealed, I didn't do it. And I was really happy that they finally had the discussion and that they were going to give Caudron a happy ending. But then they spoil it at the end of this episode. I will talk about it later, but they do completely spoil this scene they have with Daryl and Caudron right at the end of the episode, ruining Caudron's like whole redemption and ruining Caudron's happy ending. The only character that gets a happy ending is Fleur in this episode. And that really sucks. It really feels like Carol came into the show and they were like, you know what, kill. They're not important anymore. We now have Daryl and Carol. And I really dislike that they did so well with Caudron and fail right at the end of this episode. It's unsure if he survives or not. We don't see his body, but he just kind of runs off. And that's it after a manic episode. And if that's the last time we see Caudron, they completely ruined his character. After him barely being in the first 3 episodes, and them getting a massive role in episode 4, 5, and 6, just for them to completely ruin it right at the final bit, really annoys me. At least Fleur, the character I actually thought was going to die before watching this season, survived and got a happy ending. At least they didn't kill off every single character from Daryl Dixon season 1, but they killed off every single character but one instead. It's just really annoying and really puts a sour taste in my mouth when looking at this season. And now let's move on to the final part of this episode, and it is about them being in the tunnel. And the setting is great. I really enjoy them going across the tunnel to try and get to England. And the Scottish characters are very entertaining. They're a bit funny at times. I really like the whole scene in the tunnel, and we get to see new variants. They didn't do much with them, which is really annoying. They were in the trailers. I thought they'd be a big thing. They are just glowing walkers. And everyone just gets high off bat feces, it seems. They could have maybe tied it to the walkers. But everyone starts to hallucinate. And this tunnel scene is pretty intense. There's some great moments. And as I said, they completely ruin Caudron because Caudron sees Michelle, Daryl kills the walker, Caudron then stabs Daryl, fights Daryl, wins the fight, and then runs off, and that's the last we see of Caudron. And then Daryl, who's been stabbed in the chest, just shrugs it off like it's nothing. It's another case of like Dead City in episode 6. Negan gets stabbed by Maggie and they just do not address it. He's not even bleeding after being stabbed. At least Daryl's bleeding this time. But it's really dumb that they do that with Caudron, and then Daryl gets stabbed, but then doesn't feel the effects of being stabbed. It's like, okay, plot armor, he's just taken a knife to it's a pretty big knife as well, to the chest, and then nothing's happened. It really annoyed me. The more you think about this episode, there's just more plot holes. If you just look at it from a distance, ooh, nice action scene, nice character moments, nice story beats. However, the more you think about it, the less some of them make sense. But let's try not to be completely negative, talk about some bonuses and some things I really liked about these scenes in the tunnel. And as I said, it looked really cool. A second thing, these hallucinations can be really emotional. Both Daryl and Carol have some really emotional and fantastic hallucinations. I really enjoy, I'm going to talk about Carol's first. Carol's scenes with her in the tunnel are absolutely amazing. Her seeing Sophia and her then hallucinating killing herself as a zombie walker. Seeing zombie Carol was cool. Having that moment where Carol's like, she finally gets closure over Sophia, and it's really nice. I'm going to look over the fact that this is 10 years or 13 years after the death of Sophia. This should have been something that would have been addressed in season 3 of The Walking Dead, I think, not in season 2 of a spin-off a decade later. But forgetting that fact, the scene in isolation is really nice, really sweet, really cool. As I said, zombie Carol cool. But most importantly, they gave Carol some closure for Sophia, and it was done really well. I do feel, as I said, should have been done season 3, and I feel like they've already done it in The Walking Dead, so they've done it a second time. But it's done better in this show. I really feel like Carol's finally let go of what happened with Sophia. However, this is kind of repeat what they did with Rick and The Ones Who Live. They even do the same thing, was like, I can no longer see their face. And it's like, there is no discussions between any of the showrunners about what storylines they're doing for what characters, because they've repeated very loosely the plotline of Rick and The Ones Who Live for Carol. And it really does feel like it when they're quoting each other without even knowing they are. But it makes sense. Okay, they would have done it. We'll just look in isolation. It's a nice scene. But moving on to Daryl's scene, and this is easily the most emotional scene, and maybe my favourite scene in this episode, is when Daryl sees Isabel one final time. And Isabel's like, you're not going to die here, Daryl, because Daryl's accepted his fate, he's going to die. And Daryl then even sees his own grandfather who died at the Battle of Normandy in World War II. And it's just such a nice scene where Isabel gives Daryl that final push to be like, you're not going to die. You're going to break this kind of Dixon cycle of going to France and dying. You're going to make it back to your family, who's now in America. So Laurent went to America, he's now making it back to his family. It's a really nice emotional scene, and it's really good to finally see Isabel one final time. I got over the anger that they killed her off, and it's a very emotional scene. And just seeing Isabel walk away and walk into the fireflies, so well done. My favourite scene in this episode. And then it's immediately ruined by the fact that the Scottish people are trying to kill Daryl suddenly, even though that they were friendly. They both went for masks. Daryl got knocked out by the Scottish people, and they have the masks, but why are they trying to kill Daryl? It seems like they're like, okay, we need to kill off these Scottish people, we're just going to have them suddenly be evil so that Daryl can kill them, and then take the masks. And it just made me scratch my head like, why? There are so many weird moments in this episode, but there are so many amazing moments in this episode. This episode is very mixed, I would say. There is like these absolutely amazing moments that make the show, make the episode, but then you have lots of these little moments which undermine other moments of the episode. They just make no sense. It's like, what's going on? But once Daryl kills the Scots and he's uninjured by the stab in his chest, him and Carol finally reunite, put on the masks, and walk to England. And that's the end of the episode. There is no closure on Gaudron, and the episode just suddenly ends with Daryl and Carol, now alone, walking to England, and they just start the status quo all over again. And moving on to my conclusion, I would have to say this episode is enjoyable but underwhelming. They could have done so much more. This episode felt rushed at times, too slow at times, and there's just too much story and not enough time. And I would have to give this a 6.5 out of 10. I can't give it a 6, however, I really cannot justify giving it a 7, which is equivalent to episode 5 and 2. I feel like those episodes do have issues, but they are slightly better than this episode. So 6.5 out of 10, and I do not know what Norman was talking about saying this is the best episode he's done in years. This is easily not, and this is, my second worst episode of the season. This episode did not deserve the hype, and I think it's just an okay episode. It was an okay episode, an underwhelming finale. But please tell me down below, what did you think about this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts about episode 6 of season 2 of the Book of Carol? But this is it for me today, so goodbye, peace out, and I'll talk to you later.